In an interesting move, the NASCAR Hall of Fame nominations panel puts Matt Kenseth on the ballot maybe a year early. I'd consider myself probably the biggest Matt Kenseth fan on YouTube, so today I'm going to tell you why Matt Kenseth, without question, controversies aside, deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. If you missed it, late last night I posted my reaction to yesterday's Richmond Raceway Cup Series race and the dramatic strategy play at the end. It's a short week this week. Martinsville is on Saturday night. Trucks actually race on Thursday night, but we've got a lot of interesting topics to cover over the next few days. We're beginning today with the Hall of Fame. Today, the Hall of Fame announced the class of 2023 nominees. Remember, the NASCAR Hall of Fame ballot is divided into two separate lists. There's the Modern Era ballot, of which 2 drivers are selected every year. And then there's the Pioneer Era ballot, where 1 new member is selected every year. So 3 will go in the class of 2023, but the voting for next year's class takes place in exactly 1 month on May 4th. Now, many of the names that were on last year's ballot carry over to this year, including guys like Carl Edwards, Harry Gant, Kirk Shelmerdine, Ricky Rudd, Neil Bonnet, and others. But today, the NASCAR Hall of Fame announced 4 new nominees. 2 for the Modern Era and 2 for the Pioneer Era. Headlining the Modern Era nominees, Matt Kenseth is now Hall of Fame eligible. Tim Brewer, who won championships as the crew chief for Darrell Waltrip and Cale Yarborough, has also been added to the Modern Era. AJ Foyt and Sam Ard were added to the Pioneer Era ballot, but the focus is on Matt Kenseth. Matt Kenseth was racing full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series less than 2 years ago. Traditionally, you're expected to wait 3 years before you're Hall of Fame eligible, but NASCAR and the Hall of Fame nominations panel called a bit of an audible. Bob Pockrass from Fox Sports tweeted this today: "The nominating committee determined that Matt Kenseth has been retired for more than 2 years. He didn't race in 2019 and 2021, but filled in for Larson in 2020, which committee felt was an extenuating circumstance that shouldn't impact eligibility." I mean, fair enough. We all knew Matt Kenseth was eventually going to be Hall of Fame eligible, so when exactly it happens isn't the most important thing in the world, but that is surprising because he basically raced full-time in 2020. He ran 32 of the 36 races that year, including the All-Star race. He was a full-time driver less than 2 years ago. I figured we'd have to wait at least another year or so until he was Hall of Fame eligible, but he's eligible this year to go in next year, potentially. There's a more obvious reason the nominations committee made this decision, though, and I'll say this: I feel bad for anyone who doesn't make it in the Hall of Fame this year, or who doesn't get voted in on May 4th. Guys like Carl Edwards, who won 28 Cup Series races, Ricky Rudd, Jeff Burton, a lot of drivers and crew chiefs on that Modern Era list that I think are borderline Hall of Fame eligible. If they don't make it in this time around, they're going to have to wait a couple of years, because in 2023, both Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus will be eligible. See, that's why they moved Matt Kenseth up a year, because everyone feels like Matt Kenseth is probably a first ballot Hall of Famer, but Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus, the 2 guys that won 7 Cup titles together, they are without question first ballot Hall of Famers. And I think for media purposes, for nostalgia's sake, NASCAR wants Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus to go into the Hall of Fame together. So I think this year, who knows, Matt Kenseth probably gets voted in, maybe a Burton, maybe an Edwards, maybe Neil Bonnet. But next year, I think it's safe to say Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus will be the 2 Modern Era nominations. As a Matt Kenseth fan, I actually really appreciate the NASCAR Hall of Fame committee doing this, giving Matt Kenseth a chance to go into the Hall of Fame on his first attempt. You look at the guys on that Modern Era ballot, and I've named a bunch of them. There are a ton of really talented, really great drivers, crew chiefs. Larry Phillips, Harry Hyde, I hadn't mentioned them yet. A lot of great names. I think some of them will sneak into the Hall of Fame. I think if you haven't won a championship and you haven't won at least 25 or 30 races, you may have to wait a long time, maybe forever. I think Carl Edwards is really borderline because he did win 28 races, didn't win a Cup title, kind of abandoned the sport after he shockingly retired early. God, that's a tough call, but I feel like Matt Kenseth, a 39-time Cup Series winner, a NASCAR Cup Series champion, a 2-time Daytona 500 winner, 2000 Rookie of the Year, also won the Southern 500, the Coke 600, won that race as a rookie. I feel like Matt Kenseth, based on the stats, should get voted into the Hall of Fame on May 4th. But I do want to point out a different perspective coming from someone who has tremendous respect within the NASCAR industry. I mentioned him a moment ago, but Bob Pockrass tweeted today, "With 39 wins and 1 Cup championship and 2 Daytona 500 wins, Matt Kenseth will get in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Whether the Logano incident impacts when he gets voted in remains to be seen." A fan then replied on Twitter, if Gordon dumping Bowyer in 2012 didn't affect his, then Kenseth has nothing to worry about. To which Bob Pockrass replied, ranking third in all-time wins and having 4 titles is a lot different than ranking 21st with 1 title, plus I wouldn't view those 2 incidents as equal. Similar, but not equal. Now look, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Bob Pockrass. Who doesn't? I don't mean to pile on Bob here. He's a tremendous resource and a gift to the motorsports community. But I bring this up because Bob Pockrass has a vote this year. He is on the voting panel. He will help decide who gets into the Hall of Fame this year, and it sounds like he's at least planting the seed. It sounds like he may not vote for Matt Kenseth this year, which that's his prerogative, that's his opinion, and I respect it. And obviously he's not saying that explicitly. He still very well might vote for Matt Kenseth, but he's leaving that door open, and it got me thinking. I mentioned Carl Edwards. He's not been voted into the Hall of Fame yet, and I think part of what's holding voters back is the way he exited the sport, the way he retired suddenly when he was still in his mid to late 30s, still in championship form, retired without any warning, and then hasn't really been seen much since. Like occasionally he'll do like a Zoom call from his farm in Missouri, I think, but we've seen like 10 minutes of Carl Edwards over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think NASCAR and the community looks at that negatively. They look at Carl Edwards' departure from the sport as kind of a blemish on his record, and that's why perhaps he's not been voted in yet. I mean, of course, we talked about his stats. Maybe the stats don't measure up just yet either, but that's certainly a contributing factor. Bob Pockrass, they're suggesting that maybe some voters will view the way Matt Kenseth handled that Joey Logano incident in 2015 and may view that similarly. May hold that against Kenseth, and that may prevent Kenseth from getting into the Hall of Fame on his first try. Now, unlike Edwards, who I think we don't know for sure if he's going to make the Hall of Fame, Matt Kenseth, as Bob Pockrass says, will eventually make the Hall of Fame. We don't have to worry about that. But will it happen this year? There's at least a twinge of doubt. Now, as you may have guessed, this is one instance where I am horribly biased. I mean, Matt Kenseth objectively is a great race car driver. I read you the stats, but I am certainly biased. I'm a huge Matt Kenseth fan. He was the guy that got me into stock car racing. So it's tough for me to tackle this completely objectively, but I'll do my best. Bob Pockrass's point in that one tweet where he says he doesn't view the Gordon Bowyer and the Kenseth Logano instance as equal, that doesn't quite compute. I think it's pretty clear that what Jeff Gordon did to Clint Bowyer was significantly worse than what Matt Kenseth did to Joey Logano. Not to keep rehashing the past, but it's important to make my point. Jeff Gordon not only wrecked himself and Clint Bowyer, he also wrecked an innocent bystander when he took Bowyer out at Phoenix. Bowyer was very much in championship contention still until that wreck that effectively took him out of any sort of realistic contention. Whereas when Kenseth wrecked Logano at Martinsville, yeah, that was a huge blow. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But Joey Logano could have still run well at Texas and Phoenix the next 2 weeks. He could have won one of those races to make the championship four, and instead he went and blew a tire on lap 10 at Texas and finished 40th. The Gordon Bowyer feud kind of popped up out of nowhere. Yeah, they'd had some small run-ins throughout the season, but at least from an outside fan's perspective, I didn't see that kind of retaliation coming until it happened. Whereas the Matt Kenseth Logano stuff had been widely publicized. Brian France supporting Joey Logano. Logano kind of irritating Kenseth at Talladega. They played that all over TV, all over Radioactive. Keselowski wrecking Kenseth at Martinsville. There was a lot of buildup. Pretty much everyone in the industry knew something was going to happen. So I agree with Pockrass. The two incidents are not similar, but I feel like the Jeff Gordon incident was a bit more egregious. Obviously, NASCAR disagreed. They suspended Kenseth for 2 weeks. Gordon got a fine. Pockrass is right, though. Jeff Gordon's arguably the greatest race car driver ever. That wasn't going to stop him from getting into the Hall of Fame on his first try. And I'm not defending Kenseth's actions in 2015. I think the 2-race suspension was a bit harsh considering what Gordon got for his incident a couple years earlier. And I do feel like Team Penske had something coming. They had wronged Kenseth multiple times that year and had almost gloated about it publicly alongside the commissioner, the CEO, I'm sorry. But I don't think Kenseth handled that Martinsville incident the way I would have handled it, for sure. The way I see it, Kenseth already served his time. If he's not voted into the Hall of Fame next month on that basis, with the Logano incident as the looming black mark on his record, that'll be a huge disappointment. And it would set a weird precedent. Like Kyle Busch, he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer, most likely, but he's done some very questionable things. I think what he did to Ron Hornaday at Texas is worse than what Matt Kenseth did to Logano. Will the Hall of Fame committee hold that over him and keep him out of the Hall of Fame for an extra year? Is that the precedent we're going to set? I don't think so. I think Matt Kenseth will get voted in next month, but guys like Bob Pockrass, again, very well respected. He's got his finger on the pulse of the racing industry, planting that seed, suggesting the Logano 2015 incident may possibly keep Kenseth out of the Hall of Fame for an extra 2 years. years. I don't think it happens. If it does, I'll be shocked and very disappointed, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you feel like Matt Kenseth should be a first ballot Hall of Famer? Do you think he should have to wait a couple years? Are you surprised that the Hall of Fame committee moved him up a year? Because that's kind of what they did. Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. I look forward to reading them, but that's gonna do it for this episode. I appreciate you guys letting a horribly biased Matt Kenseth fan rant for about 10 minutes. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much for the support. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you as always to my amazing Patreon supporters. You guys go above and beyond every single month. I truly appreciate it. We'll be back probably tomorrow. Again, got a lot to talk about this week, and it's a short week. A lot of content condensed into a short time frame. Thanks for watching this one, y'all. I'll see you again very, very soon.